This conference will now be recorded.
You have to have those. That's hard. It'll be a fun Christmas. Any other stories? Our kids are that daughter, pink wedding shotgun. Don't want to breed them. They're gonna want to breed them, actually. That's right. So all your horses can be walking around and breed. One of those guys, too, so. All got daughters, knockout. So, buy them wedding shotguns, too. Yeah. Yeah, get a custom. Stuff like that. Go get it.
So we're off and running with that lovely little melody.
Yeah, that's why I take my phone, put it in the airplane mode. Of course, I always forget to take it out, I have my phone.
They copied you, did.
Now, Yellowstone, just got the land. Test. Yeah, that works.
Yes.
Brad?
Caroline.
Test. Test. Greg?
Sure.
Say it. Come on. Okay, that's the first song.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And first, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. All right, I'd like to have the approval for the agenda.
Commissioner Can, I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I second. It's been motioned and seconded. Commissioner Nye, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Donner, how do you vote? Aye. And I vote aye as well. All right, for tonight's meeting, the commission will go ahead and accept public input and review the recommendation and discussions of the proposed candidate ordinance number 2022-03. The public is invited for input discussion. No final decisions will be made tonight at this workshop. All right, so this is information gathering only. We want the ideas so we can go ahead and start, actually putting together the final draft. And we'll be presenting that at next week's town meeting. So there will be no decisions made tonight.
Commissioner, I was gonna have you read the note, but I guess you pretty much hit it.
The what?
The note,
Yeah, you already got it.
you got it, you're fine.
All right, so that the public can hear that are on the, online and on the phone, make sure when you're talking, please, talk into the mics. They don't pick up if you're too far away, so if y'all just pass the mic around, and that will work. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll start off hearing from the people here in the room. What I would like you to do is just go ahead and just state your name and address and the comments that you want to make as far as the cannabis ordinance goes.
I'll go first. All good. Hi, everybody. My name's Bob Boylan. I'm one of the owners of Roadrunner Manufacturing and Burke Health Shop. We've been here for a couple years in the city, and we're going to be a dispensary and wanted to try to answer any questions we could for the public, for the commissioners, however we could about the industry. We are a little bit of a different model. We're a wellness-based model, so we refer to ourselves as a health shop, not a dispensary. It's one of many things that we have in our store. So, but we just wanted to come tonight, introduce ourselves to the public, let the commissioners know that we want to do our part in our community, however we can help. Many of you are new. The prior administration, we worked with Ron, the old police chief, before he retired. Kyle actually used to be a professional baseball player. We did a custom bat that was auctioned off for the community. I believe the funds were used to create a line item for a canine unit, potentially for you guys in the future. So we will be more than happy to do anything we can, whether it's helping with Parks and Rec, however we can fit in. So we want to be good members of this community. And we'll make sure that you guys know that we're not going to have loitering issues, that everything will be highly secured and taken seriously.
If you had the chance to read the two proposed ordinances.
We have, and we have some concerns that Lori will allow her to address.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Bob, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Have you got a business card with you by any chance?
I might. Let me look. We'll see.
If not, we take credit cards.
Okay, that's good. And I also wanted to invite you guys, and we can probably do the same thing for the public if they want to see kind of behind the curtain. We'll be happy to let you guys see any of our facilities, how we do things, you know, to try to, we want to extend an olive branch and let everybody know we know that there's a lot of misperceptions that some of them may be rightfully earned by our industry. So we just want to reach out and try to assure everybody that we take this seriously. Remind also everyone that we expect 25 to 40% of our customer base to be medical patients too. So rec will be part of it, but it will not be, you know, the prominent part in our model. So.
And where was your location again?
We're right across from Tractor Supply, Verve Health Shop, and then
Yeah,
Yeah.
next door to Real Coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we have our manufacturing at 2 George Court. So, and we're vertically integrated, which is a micro producer, manufacturer, and retailer. We're fully family owned and operated, so we're not a multi-million-dollar corporation like some of the other players.
So right now you only hold the state license for medical purposes?
No, sir. It'll be for both. I just wanted you to know that
At this
our
stage.
model, right, our model is a wellness model. So we look at THC as there's many cannabinoids, there's hundreds. So that's one cannabinoid. We've been working with CBD and been a manufacturer in your guys' town for, you know, over a year and a half. So, we're in good standings with the state. Lori won't brag about herself, but she's really good with SOPs. We've worked closely with the Department of Environment too, at the state level. So we try to be transparent, and we believe in education and advocacy above everything. So we don't look at this as, I don't even know the word for it, but, you know, we take this model as a wellness model. So.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Lori Boylan. Our address is 23 Dingo Road in Moriarty. But like we said, we have our businesses here in Edgewood. So, but yeah, I was just going to say that up until now, we've been in the CBD, in the hemp industry. And so that's where we're talking about the manufacturing and the retail that we've had up until now has been in that vein. So we're getting into the cannabis licenses, and I just have a couple of things to say about the ordinance that are proposed, mainly on the retail side. There was a couple of different things about the times that the retail is to be open, and I just wanted to say that, because one was like closing at 5 p.m., cutting it off at 5 p.m., and in my opinion, that doesn't allow for people from, like, people that are working from Albuquerque to come in. We've had that with our retail now, is that, you know, if people can't get in to the store on time, then they're not able to get their medicine or, you know, their vitamins and supplements. So we just want to be open long enough to accommodate that that situation, you know, and then there was also part of it that said that they were going to not allow deliveries, you know, for the retail customers, or deliveries after 5 p.m. And so we would like to see that extended some to allow to like 6 or 7 p.m. would be great. And then it also said that, one of them also said that they didn't want to have curbside delivery. And so in these times when, you know, people can't get out, things are opening up, so that's great. People can come in the store, and I think most people like to come into the store, but we also, like Bob said, are going to have a lot of our patients, or a lot of our customers are going to be medical patients, and so they may not be able to get out of their car, so we would like the option to be able to just bring the product out to them in their car if they choose to do that. So we would like to be able to offer that service. And it's, you know, we do not want to lose our license, so we're going to do everything, you know, the best we can, and, you know, just try to be very customer service oriented, and, you know, so I guess I'll end there.
How would you do your curbside service?
We'll have a online ordering, a way that for them to order online, and then if they choose to do curbside, then we will come out with just a little device that we can scan their ID and they can pay. We will be having where they can pay with debit cards after we're still getting that ironed out and all of our applications submitted, but we'll have that so they can just pay either by cash or with a debit card right there at their door. But we'll have the order all ready for them, and then we'll just bring it out.
That'll be in secured packaging too, so everybody knows that that's child-proof, resistant, extra bags.
Brown paper bag.
Yeah, no, sir.
You would be surprised how many people have said something to me about that.
I feel that they're responsible. There's children that's not appropriate.
I've had some discussions with other people about the times, and I know on the other secondary proposal on that was 7 to 7, and it was brought to me as far as a compromise where the medical part definitely be 7 to 7 or even longer, because we definitely don't want to hinder anybody who needs the medical portion like that. I've seen this stuff do wonders. It's the recreational side a lot of people have the concerns about, and doing a hybrid where medical is 7 to 7 or longer if that's the hours you want to run. But doing the recreational from 7 to 5 or 7 to 6.
I think if you could allow just an hour from Albuquerque, that would make a big difference in our bottom line as a small business.
Do you anticipate a lot of business coming in from Albuquerque?
No, but the people that have to get up the hill,
That
you
live
know.
here and like work in Albuquerque. So that's what I was saying, a lot of people will work in Albuquerque and then, you know, it takes them a while to get back into town. So, and it might be difficult for our customers, I mean, we can promote that if that's the way the rules stand, but, it might be difficult, like, why can't I come in and buy my products, you know, if I don't have a medical card? But this person can go, and that might be confusing for our customers to be like, well, you can come in until 6 and you can come in until 7, you know, so that would be my only issue with different times for different patients.
I think there's a perception of loitering and problems and security issues and a lot of things that I agree need to be taken seriously. I would definitely cut it off at 7, personally. I think that's reasonable. I bet some of the larger players may not agree with that. I think that's probably just sensible, you know. I think that's reasonable. So, if you did that, you would definitely reinforce the idea that people that are med people to keep getting their card. That's going to be a concern, Commissioner, just so you know, because some of them will do it based on the taxes, of course, but there will be a big fall off in the medical program for people that actually get their cards. They'll say, why am I going to, pay for a license to do that? I can buy that off. So some of the rec, sorry about that. Sure. So some of the rec patients actually will be med patients because we'll see the cards fall off. They just won't renew them. So it really depends on probably their financial status because it'll be about taxation, which is, a chunk. So to me, if you have your card and you want to support the program, you should keep your card. I have my card. I've had my card for over a decade. So I happen to be PTSD. That's another thing. We want to be very welcoming so that the people come in, they feel comfortable in our store. We'll take the time to answer whatever questions we can because we look at this as a holistic approach. So it's not just about getting high, and I understand that that's part of many outsiders' perception, and we don't want to advocate for that. We want to advocate for people to use cannabinoids, whether it's CBD or THC. There's hundreds. I actually, my background and degree is in kinesiology. So, there's hundreds of cannabinoids. For example, there's CBN. CBN has no psychoactive properties, but it's a natural sedative. It's really good for going to sleep. So we're just kind of scraping on the surface of cannabinoids and how they're used and the formulations. When the FDA backs off, we'll have more national case studies that will give us foundation, which I think a lot of people have known for a long time. We just need more scientific validation.
Maureen, Bob,
Sure.
what are your current hours now?
We close at 5, Commissioner.
10 to 5.
And what, 10 to 5?
10 to 5.
And Saturday it's 10 to 3.
And we're also, we choose to respect everybody's time on Sunday, so we're closed on Sundays. We plan to maintain that too, no matter what the competition does or the rules allow.
Being that you're in the medical side of the program, are you seeing an issue with your customers coming in after 5 or wanting to come in after 5? We have the two programs, the two ordinances that we have here naturally have different times.
Right.
So that can be altered on either one of these.
Yeah. Commissioner, I think 7 o'clock is really reasonable. If you guys want to avoid just some of the inappropriate side of the industry, I think for security measures, that also lets law enforcement know, hey man, it's 7:30, why are there a group of people hanging around that building? So,
Another question that I have is, well, first of all, I want to thank both of you for coming.
sure,
This puts an insight to a lot of the people that live here in the town as to how an operation can function
yes,
in this environment. So again, thank you for that, and I'm sure we're going to be asking you a lot more questions as we
Okay.
go. I know I will.
all right.
We're happy to
thank you.
answer.
So along those lines, you read both ordinances,
Yeah, we went over it as a team.
and is there any real changes that you would think would help both on safety and on consumer?
I think make sure if they're a manufacturer, find out if they're involved with solvents or any explosives, right? Because that's, for anyone that may not be familiar, New Mexican, which is now a defunct, medical provider, they actually had an explosion twice because of using solvents in their extraction process. We use no solvents. We use only heat and pressure in anything that we make. So there's nothing that's combustible whatsoever. Can't go boom. And, you know, so and Commissioner, any of the commissioners, so you guys know this, they would have to be a level 4 as far as the state sees it, manufacturer, and that would tell you if you guys saw that on licensure, they're dealing with solvents. And that to me should definitely have an area that is, if it's allowed, period. I don't believe that it's needed because it can be done without. So I'm not an advocate for anything that unsafe. But I would definitely make it where those have to be not near any other business, you know, that could hurt other people. Like in our case, we're actually with the car wash on the backside, so a lot of people don't, on the backside and the front, so a lot of people aren't aware that we're there, but we have tenants, you know, and something like that where you had a tenant, that would be endangering other people, in my opinion, so.
Wow. I've done nothing but read all day long about both medical and recreational, and I tell you what, there is a tremendous amount of information in the laws themselves, and we're going to try to do this in a few days. So I'm glad to see that a lot of this can be as amended, which will allow us to better the ordinance that we're about to undertake. Have you had CID come out and do inspections on the building for ventilation?
We had the Santa Fe Fire Marshal come out, and they do all the inspections, and that requires not only inspections on the building, but any of the extinguishers, the hood that's there has to be inspected, has to have cleaning done on that hood every 6 months, sir. And that's required by law. Any manufacturer, whether they're cooking bread or anything on any light commercial level, commissioners, they have to have their equipment inspected and cleaned every 6 months. And then,
Just for clarification, Commissioner, so the fire marshal's duties are to inspect for fire hazards. As far as ventilation and operation, they're not competent to inspect for that. That would be a CID mechanical inspector. Now, I'm understanding you, because you're already in the unit, you may not have had that type of inspection,
right.
but,
It wasn't required either by the actual state, not the engineering department, but the department that oversees construction when we did all this.
That's CID.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I should know that. Yeah, they definitely did something that, you know, in the beginning. So, do we have state contact for that? Or-
We did, it was about a year and a half ago,
Yeah, I know.
we had that all set up,
Okay,
so.
okay, all right. But whatever we can do, you know, to allow,
Sure.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Like I said earlier, I'll be questioning you here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in your process, you said you don't use any solvents, so there's nothing actually going down the drains or any hazardous waste disposals?
No, nothing. The only thing we would use is 99% alcohol included, and that's on rags primarily. So very little, if anything. And then we have to have a grease trap underneath there to catch anything prior to going into the system too. That again is cleaned on a regular basis.
Yeah, because I don't know if you're aware, but our waste treatment plant is very touchy.
I'm not aware. No, we don't put anything that shouldn't be going down the same counties.
And when you're talking about for the medical cards, I'm doing the reading, and I've done a lot of this reading. This right here, this is the state law, which is, if you're trying to cure insomnia, it's a good thing to read. For the medical side, if I understand, that is not taxed like the recreational side, right? So you don't think the tax saving for those with medical cards would be enough for them to keep their medical cards?
Commissioner, any of the other states that have switched from a med rec model, their med programs have failed. So pretty much across the board. So it would be typical for it not to. And really, the Department of Health was pretty absent in its oversight of the program and counterproductive, really didn't participate, didn't ask stakeholders to get involved like you guys are, which is wonderful, you know, to listen to our opinions. We appreciate that. So they were very isolated. The Department of Environment, Jonathan, though, that heads that, he is a really good guy. He's very fair, but he's extremely thorough, like extremely thorough. So we have to write what are called SOPs, and those standard operating procedures are how we do each and everything. So nothing's random, it happens.
Thank you.
My name's Kyle Blanks, 21 Dean Road, Moriarty. I grew up here. I've seen this place change over a very long time, and I think as a medical card holder since 2017 in Arizona, as well as for probably the last 2 or 3 years in New Mexico, the difference of cannabis changing isn't the access, it's the education, it's the advocacy. That's what we're seeing, is that adjustment we are not trying to get away from, that is very obvious when it's all about making money. You're not conceding times of day, you're not conceding a better way to do it. And that's as someone who has had to go through curbside service, has had to go through all of those measures, because I don't go to the same place maybe someone else does to access something that really helps me be the best me I can. That is a huge thing we really try and share with people, because the tool of cannabis is in that store with many other tools that we all can use. That is the conversation we are really trying to build around, that we've seen very vacant across all programs, other than in very close circles. And we really think this is a great opportunity for that community of people to actually come together, because they all see it that way. And now it's comfortable enough because you can actually have an environment to share that conversation. And that's, as someone who refuses to get rid of their medical card, because of that, you immediately lose the education behind why you would get it. That's just because you have access doesn't mean you will ever stop needing the education. And that's exactly why learning it from the hemp side, and how to help people and learn the benefits of these different cannabinoids for ourselves, as well as how to share that with others, that's why that environment is built entirely different, because we are genuinely trying to help people find a degree of wellness they may have never been shown.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Ken, or, I'm sorry, Bob and Lori, both of you how many owners are in your business?
You're looking at the three of them.
And the percentage
We're solely vested. We have no outside money.
okay, so, well, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, and that's being honest, you know, as we grow, we will potentially look at needing additional locations. So, and this is kind of always going to be our flagship, no matter how we grow as a brand. So, but at this point, it's solely us.
Okay, so all three of you are on the license right now, currently?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when you go to apply, the reason I'm asking this question is because, and again, in the ordinances, we have, there's part of it that says that all, stakeholders, should be at least 5% of the company. And in your case, it's not an issue.
Right.
But, it could become an issue for other companies, and that's kind of why I brought it down a little. I was thinking that it could be lowered to a 5 or 10%, because it should be equitable for all stakeholders that are involved with it. But they would have to be principals.
Yes.
And 21 years of age.
And Commissioner, when it comes to divulging investment at the state level, it's at 9% or above, I believe. So.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
If medical and marijuana is not taxed and recreational marijuana is heavily taxed, how do you differentiate between when someone comes in with a medical card, how much they're getting for medicine and how much they're getting for recreation, and tax it accordingly? Do you have two cash registers, or how are you gonna figure all that out? Just practical question.
If they have a medical card, it will all be taxed under medical. If they don't have that card, it's simply done a transaction. Some lessons learned, we all learn from history, right? California is kind of seeing a collapse of their program, and it's creating the very elements that all of us in this room don't want, which is the black market side of things. Yeah. And that's because of overtaxation. So there has to be a fine balance to what actual taxation level will work for the public.
It just seems there's a huge amount of room for abuse of that.
I think there's more abuse, ma'am, if you overtax, because that initiates and engages the black market. And they believe in California it's as high as 70%.
Oh, wow.
So, and they redid their whole tax model just really recently because of that.
So how high is recreational taxed?
I believe it's at 15.
It's gonna,
12%.
12.
yeah, it's gonna go up every year until like 2025.
Okay.
I'm not, but there's staggered level.
And that'll have to be amended.
Yeah.
It's every year over the next 5 years, it tops out at 18%.
Okay.
I've got a question. Now, in the operation you envision, are you going to allow consumption on the premises? Okay, because what I'm driving at here in my chief worry, okay, I think our ordinances should eliminate that. It is not required, from what I've read from the state statute. It is something you may do in our statute, okay? And we do not have to do it. And I can see a lot of the problems that might arise, you know, and there's a couple of subjects that could cause a strip of these, you know, things, and if people are smoking and trying to consume the product on the premise, I just see a whole rash of additional problems. We're out in the country. You didn't get there by walking. You got there by driving, okay, because you'll be miles from anybody else. So the idea of having a consumption on premise, you're already starting to get people high.
okay? So I think it would be very wise to include in our ordinance, I see we have the definitions in both ordinances, and under Mr. Anaya's ordinance, he hints that we wouldn't allow it to be consumed, but, you know, we'd have to stick with the state law. Well, it does allow, it does not require. So I think we should give serious thought to not allowing any on-site consumption. Does that make any sense?
In our case, definitely not.
Okay. The other thing is, we've got a couple different zones in which we're allowing certain, you know, your various stratas to take place at the same time. I think consumption, once again, should not be allowed in any of those stratas. But we have M1 where we allow certain things. We have the production. We only have the retail in one place, but if you run a top to bottom operation, which includes retail, you know, where does that go? I don't know why it wouldn't be allowed both in M1 and or in commercial, because very often those are inclusive of each other
I'll get into
anyway.
the detail of that if you'd like. I mean, that's what I did, a deep dive into the zoning aspect of this. And, I mean, when it's appropriate, or if you want me to do that now, I can do that, so.
Well, let's
Let's
Ray
let the
finish.
public speak
Yeah,
first.
Let's Ray finish and then.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed that, and I'm looking at the Angel Fire model also, okay? And they did not want any, consumption in public property, okay, so to speak, and open space, but they were a little specific, and I think they left some things out with their particular definition, okay? So I think, probably ought to specify that consumption would not take place on our trail systems, which may or may not be, you know, there'll be open space definition. It could be confusing on public right-of-ways of any kind, okay, so that on the roadways that people travel. And we're gonna have some public trails that the town is going to bless as its trail system. So I would like to include and be specific about trail systems, not allowing consumption.
Well, in the ordinances, it does state that on all, public, owned by the feds, the town, the state, or the county, there is no, having fun or whatever lack of.
Okay, well, I like to review it to be specific and not overlook a couple things. And the zoning aspects, which I think Brad will probably talk about them, so I'll like to cover those. The other thing is you got distances between establishments. I noticed in Mr. Anaya's thing, we had distances between establishments, distances from schools, and this sort of thing. We were following the state liquor law language, okay, in terms of distances, from schools. But I think maybe distances from establishments ought to be the same thing, you know, from individual establishments. And the reason I worry about that is I hate to see the accumulation of the retail establishment, all in one area. Or, you know, we only have two real paved roads in this town, okay? One going north and south of 66, and you can't settle on the freeway. So anyway, I think it would be wise to have, if we're gonna say establishments should be, I think one said 1,000 foot apart, another said 500 feet apart. Pardon?
This proposal says 1,000.
Yeah, it does, but then they also spell out how you measure that. And perhaps, and in one case, it is the state liquor law measurement from property boundary to property boundary. And in the other case, it is measured from the wall of the building and not the property boundary, which I think is a little confusing.
Well, part of that is the, property boundary, that is dealing with your schools, churches, and any other, areas where, for educational purposes for, especially for minors. It's one kind of property because if you got a large school property, and you get their football field, well, the building itself, I mean, it may be more than 300 feet just to get to their football fields. We want to make sure it's from those property boundaries. But for the actual physical building of where it's being sold from one establishment to the next, it's going to be from front door to front door, and that's why that was put in there, and put that in there as 1,000.
Okay, well, you got two suggestions, 500 and 1,000, the two.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, mine is 1,000, I think, Commissioner Nayaz was 500.
Actually, mine's 300 from property line to, property line. Direct measures from the nearest property line, of the land used for a school or campus. So that means that the first location of a property line, if the building is in, let's say, the right-hand side, it'd be the left-hand side of the property line, which would be the closest. So it cannot go any closer.
I understand the school situation. I'm really more concerned about the individual establishments at that distance.
We put schools,
He's talking about point of sale from point of sale. From one dispensary.
There's two
to the next
conditions.
dispensary.
That brings just a couple concerns for us. One, under current licensure that we have, we feel that the past administration probably misguided us on our zoning. And, if those changes occurred, so, we would ask that we get grandfathered in because they issued license to Ultra Health when we had already been in our manufacturing, you know. So I can see that creating a collision for you guys. And one of the other things under licensure, in the state law, it states that once a license is established, you can't force that entity to move.
No, and I agree with you. Okay, and I do think, you know, you wonder what will happen with the medical establishment once this goes in. And I think it would only be fair and just to grandfather their locations regardless of what we do about future locations.
We would deeply appreciate
Yeah,
it.
all of this is for everything going forward from this point, anything
Right.
that's already exists.
I just wanted you guys to realize they probably created a conflict for you already. You may have been aware of it, so.
But that would also include if one of the two businesses decided they wanted to relocate to a larger facility,
Okay.
then those boundaries would come into effect.
And you guys may want to consider a campus, you know, in your overall growth. So, like, if we had a chance to grow as a company, and you guys saw us as good stewards, to the community, I think, being able to consolidate into a campus situation would be ideal both for the businesses and the residents. And that would give you a lot of control as to where that is.
You mean like a central location where all.
Almost like a business park for the industry. So.
Well, that's sort of what I disagree with.
Okay.
The concentration in certain areas.
Well,
bothers me.
I was speaking more so from, just moving it out of corridors that you guys didn't want to see it overpopulated, you know, so, that was just a suggestion.
I was gonna say that, if, as far as like the distance between, I agree with that as far as the retail goes, because that's the more public, you know, perspective of the establishments, but when you include like manufacturing and, indoor grows, because I did see also in the ordinance where the, grows production was only gonna be in agricultural zones, and like ours is an indoor grow, so it's all completely enclosed, you know, so it's not, it's not in an agricultural zone. So, if it's an indoor grow, there may be a different area, either, I don't know, industrial or, you know, some other zoning that it could be in if it's an indoor grow. And then as far as, because in the ordinance it also says about having 1,000 feet or 500 feet in between establishments, which would include manufacturing and production, whereas if you have a manufacturing zone and you're limiting people to only being 1,000 feet from each other, I don't know how many would be able to fit into our manufacturing zone. I don't know how big they are. So, that was just, might limit it.
Also, odor control, you know, that's an issue, I think, for everybody. I saw it come up. I want to let you guys know how we address it. We use a HVAC HEPA system that kills both with UV and filter. So we did that just to be good stewards to our tenant, for the car wash, and make sure. So, right from the very beginning, we realized that could be an issue, and we tried to be proactive. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, first thing I want to just kind of make a little clarification here, that, again, this is a workshop, and we're going to take all the suggestions under advisement, and then when the full commission meets, then at that point, we're going to decide at what point where distance is and that and forth. So the 1,000 feet, the 300 feet, the 500 feet, that will all be finalized whenever we have the full commission. So, but I appreciate this between distances and why you guys think that they should be different. Again, thank you.
Sure.
Is there anybody else that'd like to come forward?
I just got a couple real quick. I know you're open from 10 till 7?
To 5.
10 till 5. And you're suggesting 7 is a better time?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
the 10 a.m. opening, would it be better to open it at 9? Or I know there's been talk of 7 to 7. What do you think on that?
I think the larger providers are probably maybe going to request something like that. You know, in our case, we just know our customer base and kind of when they get out, when we usually have sales. So
the 10 to 7 would work fine for you?
yeah, and it's also staffing issues. We don't want to overburden our staff.
Okay, and then you mentioned deliveries. Do you do deliveries now?
No, not currently.
Are you
And
thinking that would be something that should be addressed?
I think it should, and I think it should definitely some common sense things like I would use just unmarked cars, you know, nothing that was a big billboard that pulled up. Not so that it's, even if it's not so much from the offensive to the neighbor's perspective, but it's from the security perspective.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues with that, ma'am. Like, they're talking about cages in the cars. People have brought up, well, if I'm 20 seconds, 30 seconds stooped over in a cage, and they will start to identify those cars based on that. So I think that's going to be an ever-changing, always learning, and whenever we can involve the police department to get their oversight about security, we're in complete favor of it.
Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Salgado. I apologize for my real casual attire, the baseball cap. If I took my baseball cap off right now, it'd probably scare you to death, so I'm not gonna do that.
You won't scare me, believe me. If it was a star, I'd probably say something different.
Okay.
Can you also give us your address?
Yeah, my address is 13517 Witcher Avenue Northeast in Albuquerque. Witcher, Witcher. I want to give you my email address if you don't mind too. This might come in handy. It's leonard@pecosvalleyproduction.com. And you can also have my phone number, which is 505-401-6324. I'm the Director for Business Development for Pecos Valley Production. We are the local licensed, vertically integrated cannabis establishment here in Edgewood. I'm the gentleman that was responsible for bringing the dispensary that is located on Highway 66, okay? So I will tell you, I've been in the industry, for about 9 years. I've been in New Mexico, just so that you know. I've been in New Mexico since 1977. When Uncle Sam gave me a one-way ticket here, and I got out of the military. I got out of the military as a law enforcement official for the United States Air Force, okay? So I'm very familiar, obviously, with the industry. I've established dispensary locations in approximately, I would say, 15 different counties in the state. So I'm very familiar with the different ordinances and zoning requirements and what have you. I give you my information so that if I could be a resource for this committee, for this commission, I want to be that resource, okay? Because I think I can provide you with some insight that you may be looking for or that you need in regards to establishing the final ordinances that you may put together. So I'd like to be a resource for you if I can. I just want to bring out a couple of things. And first of all, I would like to invite everyone in this room, if they would like, to tour our facility. I can arrange that for you so that you can get an idea of what these facilities look like up front and personal, okay? If you have your medical card, bring it and we'll go ahead and provide you with some medication if you'd like. But we're looking forward, and we're very happy to be able to be in your community. You know, just like in every community that we're in, and you'll probably see me around your community and talking to various groups and various organizations, because that's what I do. I actually teach cannabis history for a company called Seedcrest. I'm a faculty member of their group, and we actually teach cannabis, a whole curriculum of cannabis that's currently offered by CNN. So you can go to their website and get enrolled in their program, and you'll hear a little bit of what I provide as far as cannabis history. So I just wanted to touch on just a couple of things of what's been mentioned already. First of all, we are located right next to a chiropractic facility, okay? Pardon me? Yeah, and I can tell you that from day one, I knocked on the door and said who I am and who we are and what we're doing in full transparency, and they were actually very happy and were anxious to refer patients to us. So we've established that relationship, and we will probably end up doing some cross-marketing with that chiropractic group. So I'm excited about that. We have had no issues as it relates to odor of the product. Of course, our product is, we strictly are doing retail at our location. We don't intend to do anything more than that. But our product is packaged, and it doesn't, it's not affecting the chiropractor. It's not affecting the Domino's Pizza next door to us either. Okay. Medical cards. In case you're not aware, there are over 130,000 patients across the state that are medical card holders, okay? I didn't bring the number, but I'd be more than happy to share with you how many medical cards holders are registered in your community. And you may find that they may be your next door neighbor, okay? But I have talked to a lot of card holders. Being a veteran, I've spoken to many veterans across the state, and they have told me straight to my face that cannabis has saved my life. Okay, so I could go on and on about that, but certainly there are...
Excuse me, sir, just for 1 second. There's a law against divulging names, medical issues?
Sure, it's HIPAA.
Yeah, and, so let's kind of watch that just a little bit, okay, so that we don't,
No,
because you had mentioned that I could give you names and don't do that.
No.
Thank you.
All right. However, we actually pay for medical cards. We actually will pay for someone if they want to get their first card or renew their second card. And so we highly encourage that, and we will probably continue to have and provide a mechanism for people to get their card, because we want to encourage people to keep their card, because their medicine is going to be less expensive, period. So if you want to save some money, you keep your medical card, all right? So we encourage that. And anybody, if you know anyone who's interested in getting their medical card, give them my phone number or email address, and I'll make that happen, okay? Let's see, what other things? In regards to the hours, our normal hours of operation throughout the state are anywhere between 9 and 6 p.m. 7 to 7, that works. We probably won't open. Right now, I think our office hours are 10 to 6. It seems to be working. Of course, with adult use, and by the way, let me say this because it's important. It's adult use. It's not recreational cannabis. If I could make a suggestion to you all, I would change all, to remove the word recreational and use what it should be identified, and that is adult use. And I believe that's also in the Cannabis Control Act, that language. So, I mean, plain and simple, you don't have recreational alcohol. It's cannabis. It's not marijuana. It's not dope. It's not pot. It's not ganja. It's cannabis. It's not recreational cannabis. It's an adult use cannabis. So I'll just make that comment. Curbside. We need curbside. We survived by curbside during the whole, and we're still in the COVID pandemic. We need that. There are many safeguards. People normally order online or call you up, but I can tell you that we check the identification of an individual and their medical card every single time they come into the dispensary. Every single time, 100% of the time, we check their identification, their ID, and their medical cannabis card. And by the way, the state of New Mexico, the Department of Health keeps an extensive data bank of how much product or medicine that you've purchased on a real-time situation. So you know exactly when somebody has already exceeded their allotment for what they can purchase. So that's kept in real time. So curbside is I think a must, and I would strongly encourage this commission to consider that. I think those are really all of my notes. Again, I just want to say we couldn't be happier and more excited to be in Edgewood. I've been trying to get to Edgewood and open a dispensary for almost 4 years now. And the folks in Roswell, where Pecos Valley is based out of, that dispensary represents our 14th location in the state. And we couldn't be happier to be here. So I thank you for your time this evening. And again, if there's anything any question that you may have, I can answer it now, or you can get a hold of me later on. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
So you're manufacturing also?
We are a vertically integrated cannabis established license, which gives us the authority to produce, which means growing, manufacture, and also distribute.
Okay, so all of your product is regulated and tested?
Absolutely.
Monthly, quarterly, or by the batch?
The product that we produce, all of the flour that we produce is batched and tested, whenever it's fully cured and dried, and that is a requirement by the, CCD, the, regulatory, body.
When you do the testing, do they have, is it like by batch number, and then you keep a record of each batch that's done?
Yes, sir. That batch is also maintained by the database, maintained by the, RLD and the CCD.
And are those inspections available for public review, or is that just through the government?
There's a batch on every product that is sold.
Okay.
And we maintain, the batching, inside of the point of sale, which we're required to, again, by the RLD and the CCD.
So if the customer has the product, they have the batch number, and if there's an issue, they can go and backtrack on the,
Yes, sir.
backtrack on the.
Yes, sir.
You'll continue to do all your growing out near Roswell?
Actually, we're in the process, I will tell you that we're in the process of identifying a secondary cultivation site, outside of Roswell.
Okay.
And I can tell you, it's not gonna be in your community.
Thank you.
And actually, we are in the process actually, when you come, and again, I invite you all to please come out and visit. We can arrange that as a group, or it doesn't really matter. You come in individually, but we're looking actually of having we have a sizable wall. It's probably the extent of this area here, maybe actually even larger. But we actually will have a large rendering photograph of our cultivation campus in Roswell. We sit on 140 acres in Roswell.
Old dairy, right?
It's an old dairy, that's correct. Yeah, the ownership of Pecos Valley Production, are dairymen, turned cannabis producers, and they were in the dairy business for over 25 years.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who want to? And that's what's next. All right, so we have, I don't see anybody on the phone. I see everybody on the go-to meeting. So if we would go ahead and you can unmute yourself, and we can start at the top of the list. I'm going to say Devin. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name, sir. What is it?
Hi, I'm Devin Dezensky. We have one of the grandfathered in licenses that we're sort of rebranding from Budding Hope to Prohibition 37, and we did acquire a facility right on Route 66, and we're sort of doing TI for it right now. So I'm just sort of listening in to get a little bit of information about Edgewood, and so we're looking forward to joining the community and having a successful adult use and medical license out there. But I don't have any questions at this time.
Devin?
Any questions?
Yes, Devin?
Yes, sir.
Can you, please, identify yourself again, please, for the record?
Yep, it is Devin Dezensky.
Address?
8700 Everton Avenue, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87111.
And what was the name of the avenue?
Everton, Everton.
Everton. Thanks.
Okay. try to pronounce some of these last names.
Good luck pronouncing that one. It's actually Najjar, but I'm appearing tonight as counsel for Edgewood, so I'm just here to answer any legal questions that anyone might have.
Oh, that's, yeah. I should have realized that.
Thanks for being here, Jared.
No problem.
Okay, Linda Burke.
Hi, I don't have any questions or any comments tonight, just listening.
Okay, thank you. Sabine Price.
Hi, this is Sabina Rice, 30 Kaya and Kantahi in Edgewood. I did leave a few suggestions in the chat box. One of them should probably include that there should be no consumption in public parks where children are possibly. Maybe another one is that anyone under 18 should not be permitted in the retail establishments. And I personally hope that all HIPAA regulations are going to be observed and respected. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody? All right, and Santos Martinez out from Angel Fire, isn't it? Yeah, Angel Fire. I know you've been listening. I appreciate you joining us here this evening, and I am quite interested in hearing your insights on what we've been discussing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. Santos Martinez, 12 Tanager Terrace, Angel Fire, New Mexico. Happy to assist with any questions you may have as well. I've looked over your proposed ordinances. I've just got a couple of comments that the second ordinance seems to have an allowance for integrated facilities. I think one of the things we've discovered here in Angel Fire is we passed our retail ordinance first, and we had a company out of Colorado, Arizona, and Washington State. They're all family members. It's two brothers, a cousin, the mom and dad, and they've got retail establishments, manufacturing establishments, and growing establishments in each of those states. Is that I would not be surprised when you see a retail cannabis provider wanting to come into your municipality, that they're going. You already have language I see in your ordinance that everything needs to be enclosed for the most part. That you would have someone who wants a fully integrated enclosed facility, and in one of your ordinance proposals, you have that allowance for that vertical integration that really limits it to your industrial and light industrial use zoning districts for the retail components. But I do think that this is some of the after effect that we felt. So we're going to have to update our ordinance to allow manufacturing in conjunction with retail sales, because it's already been asked by the folks that came in wanting the retail spot have already come back and said, we'd like also a space where we can manufacture our gummies and our cookies. Angel Fire is unique in that we have very limited water rights, and so they understand that they're never going to get granted permission for production of cannabis, but it'll be a very limited integration of manufacturing and retail. I think that should be something you consider, because the way I see your language now is, if you want the fully integrated, you're no longer out of the commercial district, you're really limited to the industrial districts, and that may be fine, but I think you're going to have some other proprietors who are going to want that flexibility to provide all that indoors. I think you heard from one of the other providers of the medicinal, the question was about, how do you regulate a batch? And so my background would be like the state wanting to regulate alcohol productions and distilleries. They're going to want to know how much grain was in, how much beer did you produce, so they can tax it accordingly. And so I think you're going to see similar regulations on the manufacturing of cannabis as to how much flower is coming in, how much is actually being produced as final product, so that there's not a gap in the stream of production where something goes amiss and just disappears off the books. I think the state's going to want to regulate it to a point where they're getting their nickels just as well. I do think there are some other similarities that you may or may not want to consider in looking at your overall land use ordinance. For example, somebody had mentioned it earlier that this is really an adult type of establishment. You have to be 21 and up to even walk in the door. I do think there should be a distinction between the medicinal and the retail components of what's being proposed, in that it's really anybody off the street who's over 21 has the right to enter this establishment. And if the municipality wanted to look at curbside deliveries or pickups for medicinal, I think that's kind of like a CVS or Walgreens, where you drive up and you go to the drive-through window to pick things up. That seems comparable. But on the retail side, it's really anybody 21 and up can go and walk into the establishment. In your land use code today, you have standards for sexually oriented businesses. You have them in a C2 district, but you state geographically, they have to be on the east side of V Hill Road. And then you have additional provisions on how they should be spaced apart. If you wanted to look at mimicking some of that, I know that there's a variance between the two proposed. There's one of 1,000-foot spacing between establishments. There's also a 500-foot spacing between establishments, in addition to 300-foot spacing between schools and daycares. I just think it would also, in some of your C2 districts, just looking at your zoning maps, some of those districts do abut your residential districts, and that if you wanted to consider an additional spacing from residential zone property or residential structures, you could say, for example, even though the property is zoned residential but it is vacant, there's not a trigger. But if there's residential and there is a structure, then there is a trigger. I think that these are all items for consideration if that's the direction you choose as a commission. I do think that some of the conversations you've had just in this hearing, talking about tasting rooms, that's still at your discretion if that's something you want to provide or not. But there are still other things you may want to consider as well. An Angel Fire, similar to your zoning district, there's some allowances for residential in some of your commercial districts, and as you move up the zoning district scale. So we wanted to make sure that even in those instances, that there was some spacing from residential uses, not so much as residential districts, to make sure that there was some buffers between traffic and business operations, because it is an adult establishment. Those are other things that you may want to take into consideration as well. Overall, I think both ordinances read well. The only thing that I would recommend is if you want to consider the hours of operation to mimic those that are already on the books for alcohol sales for on-site consumption. So it's similar to restaurants serving beer and wine. As an adult beverage, you could look at comparable hours as well. But again, the discretion is ultimately your decision on how you'd like to regulate that. And if you're looking to find some uniformity within codes between alcohol sales and cannabis sales, that might be another option to consider as well. But I do think that you've got really good boilerplates with both. The standards are just minor differences, but I do think that as this starts moving forward, you're probably going to have proprietors who want that fully integrated, enclosed facility. And if there's a way to address that on the front end, if you're wanting it to leave it in a C2 district, or if you wanted to those fully integrated just being more in your industrial areas, I just think that that's something to anticipate coming up soon. That's really all I have. But again, happy to share any other thoughts where I can help.
Santos, I have a question for you, please.
Yes, sir.
As far as the definitions for commercial use of a license, whether they're manufacturing for wholesale and also selling for retail, would that be feasible to put some of that language in the planning and zoning department, where it specifies special use?
Yes, it is. And in fact, there are some ordinances that we were looking at, I forget if it was Santa Fe County or City of Santa Fe, where they use that same integration type of license language to delineate on the manufacturing side, if you were a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 you would be allowed in certain zoning districts. So yes, if you wanted to look at the tier systems within the state licensing provisions and try to model that into your zoning ordinances, yes, absolutely, that's something you can consider. And it's not unique. There are other counties that have mimicked that language. I want to say that we looked at 2 ordinances. I want to say one was Santa Fe County, and there was another ordinance, maybe it was Taos, and they had used that language almost verbatim, and that really regulated their manufacturing allowances in that jurisdiction.
Thank you, Santos.
Santos, I really appreciate your input, and I anticipate probably talking to you more on some of this as we move forward. Thank you.
Happy to help.
Okay, Trevor.
Hello.
No, do you have any input you would like to make?
No, I was actually just observing at the moment. I do have a little concern over the description of a premise as we are underway building ours out and had some direction from the previous zoning guy. I think his name was Tim. So I really have a question, which is, how is that going to be defined, a premise between a brewery or establishment that serves some sort of alcohol and a cannabis retailer?
Okay. First, Trevor, can you go ahead and state your name and your address? I guess not. Anybody else? Brad, it's all yours.
Okay, so just a couple things. I just want to let the public know I'm here just to speak to the functionality regarding zoning and licensing, and I'm not going to state anything beyond that. I do want to make one comment. And one of the things that I have dealt with at the Attorney General's office was HIPAA complaints, and I've heard the term HIPAA a couple of times. HIPAA doesn't mean what you think it, but most people think it does. And HIPAA does not apply in most cases that people think it applies to. So I just caution you to be cautious using that as a concern. It is not what you think it is. So I just want to point that out to you. So having reviewed both ordinances, the way I've reviewed these is, Commissioner Brenner, I think you did a really deep reflection on the zoning aspect of what we could do. And Commissioner Anaya, I think you did a very good job of looking at the licensing aspect. And I think by maybe taking both of those concepts together, because as the planning and zoning manager, I'm going to have to deal with the zoning aspect and the licensing aspect. And I want to make sure I have good statutory guidance. I don't want to have internal conflicts, and what I want to do is be able to function in an appropriate manner to serve the business community and the people of the town of Edgewood, the consumer community as well. So I just want to make sure we have good clarity in this. So just a couple of observations again on the, I'll start with the zoning side, because from a practical aspect, the first step is going to be to determine, where can I locate my business? And that's so if you're looking at a property in Edgewood, you're going to have to look at what zoning is going to be, what properties are going to be available based on the zoning requirements. And you broke it down into production, manufacturing, and retail, and you identified production in agricultural and production in M1, which is manufacturing and industrial, and retail in C2, which is commercial and appropriate for retail. So those are all appropriate and good. It does not, in my mind, except maybe in M1, allow for that vertical integration unless you specify like micro production. Because I think micro production exactly is something a little different. I think we need to allow, in my opinion, for a micro production to be in other designations other than agricultural. One of the issues that I do want to point out to you on the agricultural production side, there is a permissive use in agricultural, for roadside stands of agricultural products, where at least half of which are grown on the premise. I think it would be interesting to have a roadside stand, but I'm not sure that's what we want. I think it might put us on the map.
I'm pretty sure it was. I can guarantee it.
So I think that that's one thing we need to look at. And even if you go through the language where it says all retail has to be done inside a building, there's a loophole there that goes to a definition, which is a loophole, which I don't see prevents somebody from saying, looking at the ordinance, and a good lawyer would say, yeah, you got a permissive use here, so I'm going to put it a roadside stand. So it's just something to be aware of. So those are the kinds of things that I try to look at.
So when you say that it would be have more or less the verbiage of a permanent,
well, I think there's there are three places you could eliminate that. Or you could just exclude that in the cannabis ordinance. You could do a referral saying item B6 is not allowable for cannabis. I mean, there's different ways that you can address that within the ordinance to prevent that from happening. You could do it in definitions. You could do it in, there's another section where you talk about, what is it? I am not finding it here, but there's another section where a little bit change of the language would prevent that. So there's different places in the, there's like 3 stopping points in the ordinance where you could prevent that from happening. So however you want to choose to do that, that's fine. I can go over that with you in detail if you want.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and then the manufacturing portion is, you identify that as being an M1, and which is appropriate, I think, because that's the designation that we have in zoning for manufacturing. I will point out to you, if you look at the zoning map, the green areas are the agricultural zones, the red areas are the commercial zones, and there is no color for M1 because there is currently no property in Edgewood that is zoned M1. So for a business to go into that manufacturing under what we're proposing, they would have to come in and request a zone change to M1, which may be fine. I'm just pointing it out. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or whatever, but you will not see a box that says M1 up there.
There's a lot of land up there too, so.
So it's
MU.
huh?
MU.
Multiple use. Yeah.
So that was
Mixed use, yeah.
mixed use.
Yeah.
Could that be?
You'd have to change, yeah, here's the big issue that I see. So we're fitting this into our current zoning ordinance. I have a lot of issues with the current zoning ordinance overall. So trying to shoehorn these into our existing zoning ordinance is a little problematic. We are hopeful that at some time before the end of the year, we can do a review of the overall zoning ordinance and make it more cohesive and understandable and modern and contemporary. And so I think that's something that's down the line. What we're dealing with is what we have. So there are some concerns there. We can make it work. And then as we go forward and change zoning, we just need to be cognizant that we're going to have to make sure that when we change the overall zoning ordinance, if we change the overall zoning ordinance, that we cannot downzone anybody. That's without just compensation. So that's a taking under the law. So you want to make sure you don't downzone, and permissive uses have to be allowable. And there is you're right, grandfathered zoning, you can't take that away unless you provide some kind of compensation for that taking. So we have to be careful with that. And then the retail.
Can I speak on that?
Yes.
Real quick? Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
All right, so we have established dispensaries already. The gentleman that called Trevor, they're in the process of building out. Where does that leave them if they're within the that distance?
You're asking, I think that's an attorney that we may want to direct to legal counsel.
Okay.
And I can give you my non-legal opinion. I mean, I work with the attorneys a lot, but I don't want to pretend that I'm going to give you a legal answer, so.
And I'm assuming we probably have others that are in the process as well.
Apparently, we have other facilities that have been told by the previous administration to go ahead. So I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that puts us in a...
I'm dealing with that constantly on a daily basis. I was told I could do something, and some cases I had to say, well, that's just wrong.
The previous administration didn't put anything into motion.
Right, right.
Okay.
Can I add something to that? It's happened, I don't know whether you're aware of it, but we had, under our C2 designation, a light industrial. And the previous administration somehow got that out, I didn't know when. But, it covers some of the questions we have, and might be a very good thing for us to concentrate on re-injecting it under C2. And then heavy industrial would be something else, which we could define. So if we went back, and the reason it was placed in, light industrial was placed in C2, because there were a lot of problems, defining very simple businesses that could fall into the light industrial. Therefore, C2 wasn't available to them, and we really didn't have an industrial zone that spelled it out. So I would think that is a goal, and you can make changes in the future and not take away the zoning from somebody, but it might be wise to look to adding that back into some of our C2. Yeah, so I mean, this is not simple stuff. What we're trying to do is make this ordinance functional, and I think we can do that with what we're starting. But just be aware, as we move forward, we may have to tweak some of the zoning aspect of it. So, and I can, there's another issue. I don't want to get too deep into it, but we have what's called residential services in Edgewood. And if you look at the definition of what that is, there is maybe a loophole that would allow cannabis retail in residential services, because you do not have a restriction in what you're currently showing as a separation from a residential zone. So you could literally have one of these next door to a house. And that may be okay if, if it's contained properly, that may be appropriate. There are other businesses. I mean, if you look at what's zoned, any red area that's next to a tan area is basically a commercial property that abuts a residential property. And so that's fairly common in Edgewood. So that's there, but there could be another zoning designation by the way that the law is worded that would allow for retail sales in residential services type zones. So, and there's not a lot of those in Edgewood, but there are some. So those are the kind of the zoning issues, and I know that those are, it's a little fuzzy, and I can get into more detail. But I think you did a really good job of conceptually what you're trying to do here, and I think with a little bit of tweaking, we have a good starting point. Because I know the goal is to get something passed so that people that are currently operating have a comfort level that what they're doing is appropriate and allowed, and that's what we should be doing, I think. But also gives good guidance to businesses that do want to locate. So on the licensing side, I think that Commissioner Anaya did a good job of kind of indicating what the purpose of the licensing is, and I went through this with him
in some detail to make sure that we did tweak some language in here, because when I use the term competency in reference to the fire department, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. That's a term of art. Competency in that case means, for example, a building inspector cannot inspect for fire. They don't have the competency to do that. A fire inspector does not have the competency to inspect for building code. So those are, and that's the term under the law that's used. So I don't want to sound like I'm making a derogatory statement against a, fire marshal or anything like that, but what we identified in the licensing is that before the establishment can be opened, there has to be proper inspection by the town for the business license overseeing, but there are certain aspects of the business that have to be inspected by code enforcement, which is Construction Industries Division, the Building Enforcement Division. And then there also has to be an inspection by the fire department for fire issues. And when we get into the security camera, there has to be, part of that is overseen by the police department, because they want to make sure that the cameras are doing the job that they're supposed to do, which is to surveil appropriately. But there's also an inspection required by the Construction Industries Division to make sure that the electrical apparatus is installed according to code. So there's and then if you have discharge, then you have to have inspection by EID, which is the Environmental Improvement Division. So I know it's heavily regulated. I mean, we live in a world where you're going to be heavily regulated. So those are all, so we went through and made sure that all of that language was relatively clear. It's clear in my mind. I understand it. Maybe a person coming in and reading it might not understand it, but it's not really as complex as it sounds. But what we want to do, the goal is, one, to make, first of all, separating that this is a separate license from the general business license, because every business in Edgewood has to register as a business, and the purpose for that is to make sure that they are appropriately paying their taxes in the right manner, so the town benefits and derives taxes from that business. So that's the basic function of the business license. But so any business would have to get that license, because we want to make sure that the taxes are appropriately coming to the town of Edgewood. But this is a separate license specific to cannabis businesses, and it has to do with making sure that we are controlling, again, air exfiltration, so we're getting the proper ventilations and controlling odors and gases. And we're also making sure that the security is correct. We're making sure both from security cameras and also how the product is secured within the building. And so that's a function of of that license as well. So I think it's pretty straightforward. It does put a burden on the planning and zoning. But when I say burden, I don't mean it's like we can't do it. I mean, it's another thing that we're going to have to do, and we're fine doing that. We have the ability to do that. But we will have to make sure that we are coordinating with all of those entities. We have to coordinate with Construction Industries. We have to coordinate with the fire department. We have to coordinate with EID. We just have to make sure that the business owner has complied with all aspects that they're required to comply with.
A lot of entities you got all tied together.
Yes.
It's almost like herding cats.
And so the existing businesses, even though, yes, they are an existing business, they're still going to, I think when we impose the license, they're still going to have to come in and get our license, which means we're still going to have to make sure that they're going through that compliance. Now, we have an attitude in the Edgewood where we really like to try to work with the business people. We don't try to be heavy-handed.
That's been our experience.
Yeah.
So it's been wonderful.
And so we would continue to do that, but we would expect businesses to make sure that just because you were already here doesn't mean that you get to not comply with certain aspects of code enforcement or safety or things like that.
Thank you, Brad. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner and I just wanted to bring up, the safety issue, just to reflect back on that, about testing a product. Lori actually wrote the SOPs for smokable hemp flower that were accepted by the state, the first set. And we actually have to do the audit of the flower, which is a batch. A batch under state law is 15 pounds, is that correct? Yeah. So, and how that's audited, so you guys know, it's taken from 3 different levels at 6 different spots within the bin. And that's just to show continuity, because many people, like Brad brought up, you know, with us being a micro producer, we may not have big lots. They're going to allow for us to mix that. That will be another subject matter in 2024, how they're going to deal with that. And I think they wanted 10% continuity if you were mixing multiple cultivars or strains together in that batch. And then as far as access to the public for the information, on our site, there's PDFs to the batch. And then Jade has a binder under our desk, which I think is a reasonable ask for you guys to ask for anybody, that she can take out and actually show the test and goes over the test, so people understand what they're looking
Did you have questions for me on any?
at. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, did you? No, thought you had one.
Oh, for Brad? No. Brad, you can go home now.
Okay.
I do appreciate your input, Brad. I mean, it was very in-depth. Some of the terminology I'm familiar with it from my industry. So when you're talking about competency, yeah, that's to the layperson, when they say something, you know, competency, they think of incompetent, right? You know, unable to do anything, and that is totally not the case in that terminology. Is anybody else that would like to say anything, or?
Yeah, this is Trevor. Somebody called, my phone dropped. It took me that long to get back on.
You were just getting ready to say your name and address, and you got
Yeah. So Trevor Reed, I live here in Albuquerque, 270 Sandia View Road.
Okay, and
so
you know, a question that you had?
So our concern is we have a good relationship with CCD, with Linda and Kristen, and we've had the conversation with them as it relates to our facility, which is the old oil change place over by the pizza joint. And one side of that is going to be a tap room, and the other side dispensary. I'm working right now with, I suck with names, the zoning guy to get an A and B designation. But it seems to me when I read one of those, and I can't remember which one, that there may be some definition of a premise, which would include the whole and all of the land, and that gives us some pause. Could someone walk me through that or explain how that would work?
Now, are you referring to where it's talking about the distance from one business entity to the next?
No, not the distance. We're fine there. Duke's up the way and PPP's down the way. But the concern of that we have liquor on one side of the old oil change place and cannabis on the other. So, like I say, we've had the conversation with the state. We feel good there. But when I read through that, there's some ambiguity in the language in the ordinance as to whether or not that would be allowable in the town of Edgewood. So that's my concern, and I wanted to ask that question.
Which ordinance are you talking about?
I guess I should have been more prepared, huh?
That's all right.
Proposed. Just a bunch of, yeah. So there was an A and a B that I read through, and it just seemed like there was a little ambiguity in the language of the first one as to separation of an establishment that serves liquor and an establishment that serves cannabis. Am I wrong about that, I guess, is the short question? Yeah.
Ken, I think that's your,
Yeah, I'm looking for the page. I recall what he's talking about, looking for the, if I get to the right verbiage.
Same thing, but just have it. Okay, here we go.
There's not that many pages you think would be that far hard to find. But I do know there was supposed to be a separation from businesses that do sell alcohol and businesses that.
Right, and that's in statute by the legislature. So in the first one, under license, under definitions, licensed premises, number 2, all areas outside of a building are specifically included in the license for the production, manufacturing, wholesale, or retail subkinds. I guess that doesn't really apply. Oh, I know, it's number 3. I'm sorry.
Page 7B4, Commissioner. The cannabis consumption area will be for the consumption of pure cannabis only, mixing or cutting. Oh, I'm sorry, with the other.
Okay, so we will not have a cannabis consumption area there. So I think more germane to this would be on page 4, under definitions, licensed premise number 3. Vector location is specifically licensed for production outside building. The entire unit of land is created by subsection or partition of land that the licensee owns, leases, or has rights. Oh, okay, so I mean, it's just kind of vague. I guess that's my question here. So page number 4 of the first proposed ordinance, the A version of it, page number 4, go down to definition, licensed premise number 3.
Okay, here it is. Respect the location and specifically licensed for the production of cannabis outside of the building. The entire unit of land that is created by the subsection of the condition of the land.
I suppose my ask would be, my ask is this, is as long as any person is compliant with the state regulation, which is fairly directed and tight, that would apply under Edgewood ordinance, right? That'd be my ask.
Okay, because the way I'm looking at it, the way this is written is talking about area that's outside of the building.
Okay.
Hey, Trevor, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Have you gone, and maybe I don't know this for sure or not, have you gone through the licensing and everything with the city, with the town yet? Have you gone through and gotten the general stuff done yet?
So Devin, who was on this call earlier, and I don't know if he still is in charge of that part of it, both with the state and with the town. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to say no, my guess. We did have a conversation with that guy. I keep wanting to say his name was Tim.
Yeah,
early on,
Tim
when we bought the building, and I have an email somewhere from like, yeah, it's a permissible use, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. But we will. It's kind of late in the week already. For sure, early next week we'll get out and meet with the new person. I sent an email to whose name is. He's probably sitting here in the meeting. My child is screaming. Sorry about that.
I thought that was a bird.
He thinks he's a bird sometimes too, yeah. Anyhow, we will get on that early next week, to be certain.
Can I ask a question to commission then, just what your guidance to me is in matters like this? I mean, I've been telling people until an ordinance is passed, we're not going to issue any licenses or do any development approvals, because I don't have that guidance other than state statute. So I'm assuming I don't have a problem talking to anybody that walks into the office, but I'm not going to go through a development review or give definitive answers until an ordinance is passed. So is that a fair assumption?
That would be a fair assumption, and this is also on the agenda for next week's regular commission meeting. And I'm hoping that we can have a final product by then so that we can have that passed into, have the ordinance passed.
Right, and I would ask if you pass an ordinance to give me some time to be able to put together appropriate licensing documentation. I need to be able to create appropriate applications and licensing documents. So I would just ask that there be, you know, maybe some time period of 30 to 60 days to allow me to at least structure something that's appropriate. So.
Well, guess what April 1st is? April Fool's.
That's when it goes into effect. I know we're all running on a very, very, very short timetable on this. Most of the other municipalities have been working on this since last January. And yeah, so they've had 13, 14 months working on it, and we've been working on it now for 2 months. As I said previously, the previous administration did absolutely nothing. And just as a personal observation, that was a total disservice to the town. And we are doing everything we can to make sure it gets out. That's why, like I said, that's why we're having this meeting. We've got this, get together here, workshop, however you want to call it, to get the public input. And so we can go ahead and combine these two versions together and come up with a final ordinance that everybody will be able to live with. I know there are going to be people out there that are going to be unhappy. But I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I've always been told you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. And since I've gotten to office, I realized that that's 100% true.
Yeah, and I would just from my experience in government, you always have the right to amend. I mean, if we pass an ordinance and something just is absolutely not working, we'll bring that to your attention, and you always have the right to amend an ordinance.
Is it better then to make the ordinance, I guess for lack of a better word, so rigid and strict until we see what's working, what's not, and you can release some of that stuff or amend some of that stuff so it's not as tight?
Well, I think you want, just from my perspective, from the planning and zoning, from the department's perspective, we just want to be able, obviously, to comply with the ordinance, comply with state statute, and be functional with the business community. And if there's some glitch there, I mean, when you pass an ordinance without, and understanding that you've had limited time to get into this, there sometimes you will discover there may be an internal conflict somewhere. I think the roadside thing is an example of that, because that's outside the ordinance. That's referring to another ordinance where that pops up. So you never know when those kind of things can occur. So you have to make sure that if there are those kinds of disconnects within the ordinance, we have we should be able to rapidly, fix those. So I don't know which theory is best. So I think you do the best that you can with what you have learned, and you guys have really studied this and have learned a lot. And I think you need to just, let's get together and working in coordination with staff and with the community, we will end up with an ordinance that fits this community.
And I think we need to do something that's gonna be both beneficial to the town and the people in the town, as well as the businesses that are gonna be operating in the town. So a healthy balance is what we're looking for here, not.
I just wondered how hard it was to amend an ordinance.
Well, it's basically you come up with, the change you want to make, it comes to the commission, motion is made, and it's discussed, and it rather passes or doesn't.
Well, it is a public hearing process when you amend an ordinance, so there is notification and public hearing.
Well, yeah, that would, meeting all the open, Open Meetings Act regulations, but I was just trying to simplify it.
You're right.
I've got a question.
Yes, Rick.
Do we have a deadline of April Fool's Day, and, that is appropriate, but that's not the point. Do we have a liability? If we don't get something ready and somebody applies for something that's outside the scope of what we want, that we clearly want, can they just do without regulation, or, are we could we really mess up by not having it ready on time?
I believe it would land under whatever the state guidelines would be.
Well, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I did answer these kinds of questions for the years I was at the Attorney General's office, and the legal counsel can correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, I think if you're making good faith effort, because ultimately the decision as to what can be done if you don't establish the ordinance by April 1st is outside this jurisdiction of the town. It goes to that branch of government the only branch of government that oversees the actions of any municipality, which is a district court. And so I think if a judge determines that you're doing due diligence and you're making good faith effort and you're not doing anything intentionally to withhold an ordinance from the town, then most courts will indicate that they are reluctant to supersede the actions of the municipality in most cases. So you're doing the right thing. You are moving forward. You're doing your due diligence. You're giving good thought. You're getting good public input. And I think we just do the best that we can. We'll come up with an ordinance by April 1st. We'll have something in place. Is it going to, and if we need to, my point is if we need to change it, we working together with staff and the community, we will come up with fixes as needed. But I think you have to, when you say liability, if you're saying, are we putting ourselves at risk of litigation? I think as long as we're making good effort, we should be okay.
I think that, on that point there, we'll just let the attorneys make that decision for us.
Well, Jared came off mute, so I'm thinking he has something to say.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick comment. So just so you all know, not every municipality is even coming up with an ordinance. So you have the ability to regulate the time, place, and manner of the cannabis industry under the Cannabis Regulation Act, but you don't need to. So if for whatever reason you don't have an ordinance in place, it would actually just default to the state law. If you do have one in place and you want to revise it later, that's perfectly fine. This area of law is going to be constantly evolving over the next, foreseeable future. So you don't have to have the absolute perfect ordinance in place because you can change it through that public process, as was discussed.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Thanks, Jared.
Sure thing.
All right, well, we got a lot of information here tonight. I do appreciate everybody that's participated. Your input was, yeah. I was starting to go looking for the names, so I do it.
You had that look.
Robin Lori.
Yeah, I get names all jumbled up real quick. But yeah, there is. You just don't know the half of it. But I do appreciate y'all coming here tonight and giving us your honest input. Everybody else that came in. When this commission was elected in the office, one of the things we were definitely wanted to make sure is that we want public input. We want to hear what's going on. even over the past, week or so, there's been a lot of griping online about a whole lot of things, and I noticed none of those people were here tonight. So it is important, no matter if you're for or against something, to show up and voice your opinion. Because if you don't, then you're just giving permission for the government body to do what they want to do. And that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are in keeping with what the townspeople want. And when we're talking the entire town, not just this side, not just that side. We want to encompass everything. And it's a balancing act to bring everything into the meeting. And like I said, some people are going to be happy, some people are not going to be happy. But the only thing is to show up and bring us your opinions. And I thank you. With that said, if anybody else doesn't have anything else to say, then I would like to call for a motion to adjourn. So, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Good.